All right, so the subject is the return of prophecy, and that is a prophecy that itself, that prophecy will return, and maybe you can quote it exactly. We have mentioned it in a few of the other calls, and then let us know what that is, what that means to you, and just take it from there.
Awesome. I'm just going to say a small thing because you reminded me of that class about the elevation of things, and that we don't think at all how we set off a whole domino effect by the tiniest things we do when we're mindful and we're living. You know, elevating sparks is one thing. It's living with the intention to fulfill the purpose we were created for. That's all that it is. It's the acknowledgement of the one God who created everything, and how everything in the world is a piece of the puzzle. So when we do the tiniest action, but when we're living in that mindful space of service, we're serving our Creator, then everything that brought us to that moment is elevated and becomes godlier at that second. So the sun becomes godlier when you eat a salad and you make a blessing. Why? Because now the rays of the sun that were responsible in producing those vegetables have now realized their purpose, that a human being in this world should recognize God. That's why God created the world, that we and everything in this world should recognize Him through our own efforts, not through Him revealing Himself. And that's our process, and that's how we elevate sparks. So let me share with you just something so exciting, because later we're going to talk about prophecy. I hope to get there. And
we'll get there.
The Rebbe spoke interesting. The Lubavitcher Rebbe predicted. He didn't predict it in a way because the Rebbe wouldn't want to, chas v'shalom, God forbid, speak of a looming danger. But the Rebbe warned, and was doing whatever he can to help avoid and to bring about the miraculous victory of the 6-day war, which was a very, very horrific moment, a dangerous moment in history. But the Rebbe mentioned something which I didn't know till today, that all the Israelis that ate on Yom Kippur, so everybody knows, like if you don't keep anything, the one thing you keep is your fast Yom Kippur. That's like the you start with. But sadly, there's a lot of secular who just not tuned in yet, so and have not been fasting. So the Rebbe said, but that Yom Kippur, all these Israelis who ate on Yom Kippur, and then they, the word came that they were drafted to the front and they went to fight. So now they were protecting the Jewish land, and they were protecting the Jewish people in their war with the food that they ate on Yom Kippur. So all that food was elevated to holiness.
Wow.
And I'm encouraged just the Rebbe can think about
Wow.
that people that are violating the commandments, because at the time they were doing, they had no idea. But if the bottom line is that that's energy that's used in the end to do a mitzvah, in the end, retroactively, it was elevated. A person may never make such a calculation. I'm going to eat something not kosher and use the energy for good. It doesn't work that way. But if God works it out that way, then that's the way it is. Anyways, so we're talking about prophecy, and it's really, really, really amazing because it's exciting. It's exciting that we are living at the cusp of time when we might just find ourselves in a very short period of time all being prophets. It's a prophecy that there will be prophecy, but it's not just a prophecy that the prophecy will return to some measure. The prophecy says there will be an explosion of prophecy, a prophecy like has never been in the world before. And one of the things we're stuck on, and this is and particularly religious observant Jews get very stuck in this. Is because we're so rooted in tradition, and we're so rooted and cemented into the past, and that we're holding on to a past that we fail to notice that the future is much greater than the past. Yeah. That the past was only a small little introduction to the future. So people are so busy with the future. So we look at the times of the past and feel like that's when, the world had godly revelation. That's when it was, and the biblical times when you had Elijah the prophet and Elisha the prophet and Samuel the prophet, Shmuel Hanavi, and all these prophets, and they're all stories of the past. So we imagine that if you're not wearing sandals, and walking in the sand with sandals without socks, and wearing a long robe and a turban, you can't be a prophet. And there will never, we have to, only in those good old days, that's when they had prophets back then. And the truth is that was only a small little preview of prophecy. That was like a little drop in the bucket to what is going to happen in the Messianic era, when prophecy is going to become as normal as communicating with Hashem, communicating with God is going to be as normal as communicating between each other. That's how normal it's going to be. It's not even going to be, this is the way the fifth Chabad Rebbe explains it, it's not even going to be a shock anymore. It's not even going to be, it's going to be a natural thing. It's going to be natural. That's the idea.
The Rebbe speaks specifically about the return of prophecy.
Yeah. The Rebbe talks big time. Well, let's talk about prophecy itself that talks about prophecy.
Okay,
so in Joel,
I do want to be able to get to, you can answer this now or answer it later, but I do want you to answer it if that's okay. What is the experience, the inner experience of prophecy? It's really two questions: the inner experience of prophecy, and then would you say that most of the time for healthy people who are in prayer and whatever, that when they hear a voice and feel like it's coming from God, would you? That happens to a lot of people.
I would have to say that a real prophecy will. I don't know. I myself have not experienced prophecy in the full measure of it. Although it's interesting that so many times we have a sense of things that are happening and then it really, that's exactly what's happening. And I believe that's because, the air is thinning out, and even regular people could pick up on certain things that until now we were blocked.
Yeah.
So for sure is like this, where those that are spiritually sensitive for sure are being unblocked much more, and therefore things are passing through. Hopefully we might discuss this. There's something called Ruach HaKodesh.
Yeah.
Ruach HaKodesh means literally a Holy Spirit that's present, that lifts a person up into a higher spiritual consciousness, into a godlier zone. But then there is prophecy. The real meaning of prophecy is God is communicating directly to a person, speaking to the person. It's not just that you're exposed to heaven and therefore you get to see things from a freer place, a place a little bit beyond time and space, and therefore you can see, what's down the road, but you actually are receiving a direct communication of Hashem himself, of God himself talking to you. Now, and on that itself, there's many, 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 many layers. And obviously the highest, most sharpest, strongest prophecy was the prophecy to Moses. Moshe was a prophet, and no one can match Moshe in prophecy. Yet, it's very interesting, which I saw today in a book called Sefer Ikarim. That's a book written back in the 12th or 13th century by Rabbi Yosef Albo, one of the great philosophical works. And he writes a book regarding all the principles of Jewish faith. And an interesting chapter, we're talking about prophecy, because you made me research it in preparation for this, so it's good. He writes over there that at the time of Sinai, when you have a main prophet in town, when you have a main prophet, then the prophet can connect everybody else to prophecy as well. In other words, we can hook up with his connection. It's almost like he creates a hotspot. And then through his hotspot, we can now tune in. So he says that's what happened with Moshe by Sinai. He says the reason why all Jews can speak to God, the highest level of prophecy is face to face, which only Moshe merited. Yet he said 2 million Jews connected on that same level because they joined into his Zoom connection. He was connected at that time. God spoke to him face to face, and he lifted everybody up into his level of prophecy, even though they on their own level of refinement were not worthy. Because to be ready for prophecy requires a lot of discipline, a lot of refinement, a lot of spiritual work.
And you're talking about the giving of the 10 Commandments?
Yeah, but at the time of the giving of the 10 Commandments at Sinai, we all heard God speaking directly, face to face. It was a full-blown experience of prophecy on the highest level. Then from there,
crazy. That's such an incredible analogy, the hotspot. It's so apt. Okay, please continue.
So that's so prophecies at various different levels. So you have to be careful, because I do believe sometimes certain things can be hallucinations. and a person needs to be careful. So, we can convince ourselves sometimes certain things. People have hallucinations and they believe, certain things. And some, again, I'm not, how to exactly discern that and understand what is real and what's not real. I can't give you a on the moment answer for sure.
Okay.
But it is an inspiration, and personally, you hear someone talking to you in that case, that God is talking to a person and communicating. Yes. So, what does it say in Joel chapter 3? Okay, so this is in verse number 1. And will be after this. Here's what it says: al kol basar. God says, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Wow, what words. And the interesting thing is that it doesn't speak of any particular group of people. It doesn't say only on the Jews. He doesn't say only on sophisticated, refined, spiritual people. It uses, it's interesting, it uses our fleshy side, our physical side, our earthy side. It says there's going to be such an intense divine revelation that God says, I'm going to pour my spirit on all flesh, emphasizing the physical. That's something amazing. Because why am I saying it's so amazing is because if you take a look in Maimonides, in the book of law, where Maimonides is the code of Jewish law and the most fundamentals, is Maimonides discusses prophecy as one of the principles of Jewish faith that we have to believe in prophecy. Because if you don't believe in prophecy, there is no Torah. The whole Torah is based on divine communication, that we have a divine law. So Rambam says that in order to be a prophet, prophets needed to kind of devote themselves to living a very, very, very spiritual life, which meant very much extracting themselves of the ordinary material pursuits. You couldn't be, couldn't be a foodie. You couldn't be, as they call that, you couldn't be deeply enmeshed in physical material experiences and be a prophet. Prophets fasted a lot. Prophets purified themselves a lot. Prophets spent hours and hours a day before they became prophets. There were people who actually were made it their goal to become prophets in the time of the temple, when prophecy was back then, thousands of years ago in biblical Israel, when people were, when prophecy was still accessible. We'll talk about it at a certain time. It kind of slowly, declined to the point that it reached the point of total, almost complete, ending of it or declining of it. Yet so there were schools of people. The Rambam refers to these people called B'nai Hanavim. They were the children of prophets. It doesn't mean children literally. It means people that were, let's call it, prophet wannabes. And they would study mysticism intensely. They were obviously people of great caliber. If you weren't someone of a more refined and higher nature, you wouldn't attempt this. But there were people that attempted prophecy, and some achieved it and some didn't. But it was a very strict regimen of discipline. You have to completely pick yourself out of the physical state of existence and train yourself to be very, very, to become almost metaphysical and during the time of prophecy itself, the people literally would lose all physical senses. They would kind of experience it as an outer body experience. Their soul would kind of leave their body. That's why their bodies would first they experience convulsions. They would fall to the floor. And then I never watched a prophet, but the way it's described in various verses is that they looked like they're crazy. They looked like something happened to them because they fell, and their body kind of shut down. And in the complete shutting down of the physical, their soul was able to attach themselves to a higher frequency and get that connection. So what's the greatness that it says in this verse when it talks about the Messianic age? The excitement is that it says, I will spill my spirit on all flesh. So what does that mean? That means that it won't be any more a prerequisite for Geula to be above the physical. Physicality itself is going to be a vessel to receive God. And that's because God is going to move into the physical world. That's what it is. The physical world will be completely in tune and synchronized and one with God. So we won't run to our soul to get inspiration. We will get inspiration from our 5 fingers, from our 10 fingers, from our toes. Our body will speak the divine. And we will connect to Hashem in everything we do. Obviously, everything will be done in a healthy way, because at that time we won't abuse any more physical things. Everything will be completely tuned in with the divine presence in the physical. But let me continue the verse. It says, I will spill my spirit on all flesh, and your sons and daughters will prophesy. Ziknechem, your elders, they'll dream dreams, meaning not foolish dreams, but real dreams. Bachorechem, your young men, will see visions. V'gam ala avadim v'ala, and even on the servants and the maidservants, whoever that is referring to, like it's concept, like, because we're living in a world, thank God, where we don't really have, servants and maidservants, but obviously it probably is referring to people that are less literate and people that are generally considered to be, people might say, less educated, and so on and so forth. And yet, by Yomim Hahema, and the verse continues, on that days, Esh poiches ruchi, I will spill it out. It's like when a person spills something. So when you're giving, you're giving deliberately, you have to come with a cup, you have to come with the right vessel. But when you're taking the bucket and you're throwing it, it's like it's pouring everywhere. It's all over. And that's the now, obviously we're going to reach a time when that's going to happen. But the exciting thing is we are already in the zone where this phenomenon is starting. That's the excitement. It's starting. We're on the way.
So exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you have so much to say. I just want to bring your attention to this question from somebody, actually a student of mine, who's, you don't have to answer it now. I just want to put it out, who started out in Christian, converted to Catholicism, has been learning with me for a couple of years now, does not feel like she belongs in that and doesn't know where she belongs. So that must be part of this also, like you're talking about all flesh, that the God is spilling out into all flesh. So if there's a way to, you don't have to, I don't want to take away from the curriculum here, but if there's a way to weave that in, how people who are not Jewish, who are not converting at this time, where is the place? Where is the community?
All flesh is clearly discussing a revelation of prophecy that will include all flesh. It doesn't say all Jews. So,
right.
What people do have to, the point over here is to abide by God's law for man, and that's the 7 no-eyed laws. That's what God expects from every human being, the moral code for humanity. So you can't expect to speak to God and then be in violation of his commandments. So the best way to prepare for this is to follow the 7 no-eyed laws, which is something that I'm sure you've discussed in previous classes.
Well, actually, we'll be universal. Not really. We'll be discussing it in the 4 o'clock call.
Oh, good. Yeah. So that's something that should be actually explored, not just explored, but that should be something that should be publicized and discussed way more than we're doing, because the time has come for all of humanity to jump on the bandwagon, because this is what's happening. Now, Maimonides tells us that this incredible a future prophecy that's going to come to the world is going to start already pre the Mashiach era. It's going to return. Because now let me bring you back to something that in the time of the first temple, because we had the Ark of the Covenant, since we had the Ark, it's another thing that is stated in the book I mentioned to you earlier, the Sefer HaIkarim. He really emphasizes this amazing idea, and so it is in many other Kabbalistic writings and in other places, where they emphasize this major idea that when is prophecy far more accessible? When God is a local call. When God is a long distance call, then it's very, very hard to get to prophecy. And what do I mean, a local call and a long distance call? And the question is, where is God living? We know God is everywhere, because he is everywhere, because it cannot be an existence without God being presence. He is the existence. He is the is of everything that is. He is the beingness of everything. Yet, when we say God living somewhere, means when he dwells in a certain place in a revealed, open way. So during the time of exile, when the Jewish people are in exile, which really means the entire world is in exile, the divine manifest presence is not down here on earth, but very, 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 very high in a very, very sublime spiritual world, very distant. Let's just say above the seventh heaven on the spiritual levels. Distant, far, far. Up there, for those that are privy to go there, they can experience and see and experience. And obviously a body can't go there, only a soul. After 120, and after a long, long journey, souls go up to the higher and higher, more sublime places where they can experience the radiance of the Shekhinah, the radiance of God up there. But down here on earth, God is not present in a revealed, open way. That was not the case when King Solomon built the temple, or when, from the period of time when Moses took the Jewish people out of Egypt, during the 40 years when the Jews were in the desert, then going in with Joshua into the Holy Land. And we merited a close to 800-year period where God dwelled openly. He moved into earth. That's the point. And the tent, the holy temple in Jerusalem, Temple Mount, which had a temple on it, and in there was the Holy of Holies, and then there was the Ark, and inside was the Luchot, and God dwelled between the two cherubs. In that meaning, over there was the headquarters for the divine, and from there the light would go out to the entire world. That's what I mean, a local call. When God is present down here, the Wi-Fi is very, very intense. So obviously, but even then, since it wasn't yet Messianic time, so it wasn't yet permanent, so it required, certain requirements on the recipient's end. People who devoted themselves and became far more refined and elevated people can tune into that Wi-Fi. So there were selected few. I wouldn't say the masses, but it was pretty common to have a prophet living at least within your neighborhood, a couple of blocks away. You had a prophet there, one or two prophets in this shtetl, one of the prophets in this little town. There were people like that. And we had men and women prophets. It wasn't, Devorah, Neviah. Miriam was a great prophetess. Esther was a Neviah, many prophetesses. But again, he says it's very much dependent on the fact that there is the ark in this world. And God, therefore, his presence to communicate with him is close. After the ark, after the destruction of the temple, so there was an argument amongst the Jewish sages what happened to the ark. According to one opinion, the ark was taken away by the Babylonians and it never returned. So it's hidden somewhere, taken out. But the more accepted opinion by the great rabbis is that it's still present and it's hidden deep in a sub-cellar in the Temple Mount. But it's under the surface in a hidden tunnel that King Solomon, with his great brilliance, had already prepared, not wanting that such a powerful tool, such a powerful the tablets that were given directly by God should fall in God. You should be able to get access, and then what that would do, God forbid, is it would empower evil in an incomprehensible way. Because evil cannot thrive on its own. It needs to derive its energy. It needs to usurp its energy from holiness. That's the way it works. So therefore, he already prepared a vault, a hidden vault deep inside. That was, obviously, King Solomon is known to be the wisest of all men, that he was able to hide it in a way that it would really not be found. And it's hidden there somewhere beneath. But since it's there in a hidden way, the mountain is still holy, but it doesn't give off those Wi-Fi signals during the time of exile. That's why, after the destruction of the first temple, now it's amazing, when Jews came back and rebuilt the second temple, they never brought up the ark up into the temple. It remained hidden during the second temple. They had a temple, but it was missing its main its main godly point was missing. So therefore, the holiness of the second temple is incomparably lower than the first temple. The first temple stood for 410 years. Second temple stood for 420 years. We mourn the destruction of the two temples now during this period of time called the 3 weeks, because both of them were destroyed at the same period of time, actually on the same day, on the 9th of Av. Hopefully, by this year, it's going to be already converted into a great holiday, because when Mashiach will come, it's going to become a great holiday. But as soon as the ark was hidden, as soon as that happened, prophecy became very, very rare. There were very few people who still had, because they were super souls, they can have a connection even when the divine presence in the world is so hidden. Maimonides says that before Mashiach comes, as part of the world getting ready for the redemption, which is the beginning of God's return to Zion, to Jerusalem, as soon as it starts. Now, what's a proof that God is coming back to Zion, to Jerusalem, to manifest? When his children come back home, when the exiles return. So you see that in the last few hundred years, it slowly trickled and trickled and trickled. And in the last 70 years, bang, what happened in Israel and the return of millions of Jews. And today, the majority of the Jewish people is living in Israel. And therefore, the Shekhinah is returning. And as the Shekhinah returns, the Wi-Fi keeps on getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So what we have to realize
You're
is
saying the collective return of the Jewish people to Israel that's what's causing this?
Yes, that's what it is.
Oh my gosh, that's
it's incredible. Jews coming back to Israel. It's all. That's what brings the Shekhinah down. That's what causes it. Now
the world thinks that we're causing the problem. If people understood what was really happening, it would be a different game, and everything would be a different game. Wow.
Yeah. The sages say had the world understood the benefit they get from the temple standing. There's a statement in the sages in tractate. I forgot which tractate it is. I think it's Sukkah. The sages say they would surround the holy temple with armies and legions protecting it, that it should never be destroyed. But instead of realizing that, they thought the opposite. They broke it. As a result of that, the Midrash says, when the temple stood, the rains all came on time. There was an abundance of blessing in the world for all of humanity. It was an incredible blessing, because the more God is present and revealed in this world, the incredible blessings come. As a result of our misdeeds and lack of appreciation for that closeness of God, it caused chas v'shalom, all the negative, and now we're coming back.
But what I'm hearing, what you're saying, I'm hearing that with the long exile, the 1900-year exile, where the Jews did not have the temple and they did not have the protection of the community, and they were spread among the nations, and they were even forced, with violence to conform, to leave Judaism, and they didn't. Collectively, that connection became I don't know the right word, decentralized and invincible, so that it resides in, that would make sense, that now that the Jewish people have accomplished that, coming back to Israel reestablishes it for the world. Wow,
yes.
That's another new thought. It's amazing.
Yeah, and the other thing is that when the Jewish people went and scattered amongst the nations, they at the same time unlocked the divine potential that there is across the entire world, in Australia and America. Right. And that's the idea of elevating sparks. Yes. So that when the headquarters is going to be again present with godliness, the world will be a vessel. Everything will be a vessel. Africa will be a vessel. Australia will be a vessel. North and South America will be a vessel. Europe will be a vessel. It all required this darkness where we can't rely on the inspiration come from above. We had to unearth our connection from within our own space without assistance from outside. And that's what unearths and unlocks the godly potential that is buried everywhere. It can't be unlocked by spiritual radiance from above. It has to be unlocked from within. And that unlocking required the exile. But now that we're done that, and we've been everywhere, and that purification happened, now it's time to go back home. And God will also come back home to this world, and then the world is filled with this incredible godly light and divine revelation.
It's so remarkable. I call this like a wink from Hashem, but somebody just literally a second before you said, now it's time to go home, she had written, I wonder if there's such a thing as going home in the right time or just to go home. Wow. And then you're saying that because it's been unlocked in all of these different countries, and because it has to happen from within, from our own efforts to make those connections, that means that is the literal mission of every single human being on earth right now, and everybody has what it takes.
That's right. Today, everybody has the ability to live a godly life.
I can't resist asking you this question. I thought somebody wrote from YouTube, I thought the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that in 1993 Geula is here and it's up to us to reveal him, whatever it says him. We should live as if Mashiach is here, so why are we still mourning? You talked about 3 weeks of mourning. That's what generated the question. If you can answer it without...
We're mourning that we're a little too slow of reveal. We're mourning that the Rebbe, that itself is a cause of mourning, that in 1993 the Rebbe says, we're ready, and it's taking us so many years to wake up, to start living Mashiach. But thank God we can celebrate that from day to day we're becoming more and more in tune. You know, the Rebbe is seeing things at the core, and it sometimes takes quite a few years for things to move out into the open. I want to share with you, because the Rambam Maimonides says that before Mashiach comes, prophecy will be restored. Okay? So the return of prophecy is inherently part of this whole, it's like we understand now, it's not just an extra thing that happens in the Messianic age, it's a natural outcome of the purification process and the return of the Jewish people back to Israel. Now the world is ready, God can fully manifest, and as he manifests, there'll be much greater prophecy everywhere. And then the exciting thing is, we are now in times that for a long period of time, we were in the period of the decline. Meaning, there was a lot of light back then, and then there was decline, until we reached like the darkest moments in history. Call it the Dark Ages. It was very dark. But then the pendulum swung, and we started to move into already the latter part of the exile in preparation. And that was when the revelation of the great Kabbalists came along. So you understand this. This is all prophecy, is all connected also to the revelation of Jewish mysticism. Isn't it amazing that for thousands of years, Jewish mysticism was not tapped into? No one studied it. There were a few selected people, called the ones that God has called upon them, who studied and learned it. Most people were just focused. They always studied Torah, but they were very focused just on the law, on the Talmud and on the law. But this whole incredible, deeper knowledge was kept in a secret. And not only was it kept in secret, no one explained it. And there was very little. And then in the last 400 or 500 years is when we merited great, we can call them prophets, who experienced divine illumination and started teaching Kabbalah in ways that we've never heard of before. And that was this is basically the world waking already up to the redemption. So it came in a few stages. It came with in the late 16th century in Tzfat. It was the great renaissance of Kabbalah by the great Rebbe Isaac Luria, whose yahrzeit is going to be soon coming up as they have his. And then it intensified tremendously with the onset and the revelation of Chassidut, which came through the Baal Shem Tov in the year 1730. The late in the early 18th century, 1730, the Holy Rebbe Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, transformed all of Europe with his incredible message of positivity and joy and service of God. And then the successor continued with all the great rabbis, including the 7 Chabad rabbis, who illuminated the world with such spectacular teachings that are unbelievable, all leading the way into the great wealth of Torah knowledge that is going to come through Mashiach, who's going to be the ultimate teacher of Torah.
In the famous letter of the Baal Shem Tov, where he goes to the chamber of Mashiach, etc., the song and the common way that people repeat it is when will Mashiach come? The Baal Shem Tov asked Mashiach, when will you come? And he said, when your teachings will be spread to the outer edges of the world and people. But there's more to the quote that has to do, and when they will make Yehudim like you, and so forth. Like, so can you explain that a little bit? That now I'm thinking that that's talking about this prophecy that you're talking about. It's not just that when we will learn Chassidus, the Chassidus in the lineage of the Baal Shem Tov, but when we will actually integrate it to the point where we can feel God, know God, learn from God, create miracles, all of that. If you could just, if there's something you want to add, or
exactly that, nothing more to add. That's exactly what's happening. If we're tuning in, and if the main thing is that we realize this is here is the big challenge, which sadly has created a little bit of a difficulty. But you know what? We shall overcome that, and we are overcoming that, because the time of redemption has arrived. Is that, you know, right before the light, there was a decree, for whatever reason, that there has to be a crushing, a very stifle, or call it stifle, I'm not the word, a very a blinding darkness came upon the world. And that, what I'm referring to, is the last 28 years since the Rebbe told us clearly the prophecy that we are standing, the words of the Rebbe says it this week in the Sikha, we are standing at the threshold of the redemption. We are standing at the threshold of Yemos HaMashiach. So the Rebbe is basically standing by the door, telling all of us, follow me in. We are going into the redemption.
Well, later,
now,
the Rebbe said,
after that,
Mashiach b'Pashtus.
yeah, what happened after that? We experienced a great darkness, and sadly, because of that, it started becoming like confusing to people.
Right.
Like, did the Rebbe, God forbid, misspeak? Did he try to accomplish something that he couldn't do?
He tried.
And he tried and he missed it. And I tell you, and I will say this very, very strongly, the Rebbe did not try and make an effort. The Rebbe is on target. And it's going exactly the way he spoke. And the Geula is coming. And the redemption is happening. And it's happening very strongly. And there's a test to our faith. There's a test to our faith. Always when it comes to prophets, because the prophet is always like, you know, way ahead of us.
Ahead of everyone else.
Ahead of everybody. So he says things which are shocking, which people like don't make any sense. And God always tested the Jewish people. Will they believe their prophet?
But you're saying even more. You're saying even more. And it's just coming out so strongly throughout this whole summit, which I did not expect. But it's becoming more and more obvious in real that it's just suspended, that it's a reality that's suspended, like right here. Because if we don't lean in, if we don't like absorb it and live it, then we're blocking it. And then we're wondering what happened, where did it go? Sorry. What?
All that is necessary is to drop it into our moment of time and space. It's there. It's just drawing it in. The reality is right there. As you're saying, suspended. It's here. Now it just needs to be drawn into the moment. It has to be like kind of downloaded into. We have to hit download into our space, into ours. Like the Rebbe said this week, his whole talk is based on this idea. Make wherever you are, Israel. Make your space where you are. Make that the divine presence. Make that the land of holiness. Make that the place where God, because the world is ready to become Israel. Everything is ready to become Israel. Obviously, even then, there will be greater holiness in Israel is the headquarters, but right. You can make your space a holy temple already. You can bring the divine presence into your space.
So the fact that you said, which was the first time I ever heard this, that it's the return of the Jewish people that is making these new intuitive, prophetic experiences more available to everybody. So how do you meld that with several people have asked the question, you're probably not following the chat, but should I just be making Aliyah? What about the fact that the Rebbe said that about 770 being the Mikdash Ma'at, or about, that Mashiach is already here or that the Rebbe didn't encourage everybody to make Aliyah, to move to Israel. So how do you meld that? How do you answer that? And also, how do you meld it with what you just said, that every place, our job while we're not in Israel, Jewish and non-Jewish, is to bring that ultimate higher level. Israel exists on a higher dimension of reality. So we have to bring that into our own place.
Okay, so let me try to answer that as follows. Circumstances are such that the return of Jews to Israel is unstoppable and is getting stronger and stronger. Whether we choose to do so willfully, it is happening. So, for example, sadly, this is not a happy news, but sadly, the Ukrainian communities are I just read a whole article today, early morning, that the Ukrainian communities that have been built up are devastated because Jewish communities, because half the people either fled to different areas of Ukraine, but so many of them made Aliyah. So many of them left Ukraine and are going up to Israel. Many people in Russia are also leaving. And from time to time, you get these stories every few years, how because of, in the United States, because of the civil unrest that we had in the last couple of years and various other things that are causing certain cities to become totally very dangerous to live in, like certain things that are happening, is driving Jews from across that till now were hesitated to make Aliyah, are going to Israel. So the increase of Jews going to Israel is happening, and it's going to continue. Now, should someone who's like a rabbi like myself, who I have a community here, I'm inspiring people in Los Angeles, and I have people over here, should I pick myself up now and say I'm moving to Israel because I know that I cannot do that unless I am given instructions by the person who planted me here and told me to be here, that my job is to inspire the people that is here. So it's almost like the Rebbe himself said that the captain is the ship captain is the last one to leave the ship. When it's drowning, it's not drowning, God forbid, but when it's time to go out of the exile and go to the land of Israel, the Mashiach himself is the last one to go, because he goes and he takes everybody with him. And if he has people outplanted across the world taking care of whoever is still there, they can't abandon and just decide to leave unless they have spoken over to their rabbi and so on and so forth, their mashpia. Every person should have a authority that they speak to who judges the situation and says, well, in this circumstance, you should go. So it's a more of an individual question, but in general, the return of Jews to Israel is unstoppable because circumstances are making it happen.
And I'm thinking that for people, well, two things. You're talking about Ukraine. It must be, in a way, very devastating for the people who built up communities painstakingly to see them broken. And it would be really such an enlightening relief to realize that that was only to help to pave the way for them to go home. And the other side of that is that so many people that I personally know are very wed to this idea of make Israel where you are. They interpret it to mean that there is no such thing as going to an actual Israel because they like it where they are. They like it in New York or this or that. So yeah, I think it's really important. Came out by
the striving to go should always be there. And yet we're holding out because we have work to still be done over here because people rely on us. Communities need support, financial support. They need people support. They need, and we have to keep the divine presence all over the world. Now, once Mashiach comes, the presence of the Shekhinah in the land of Israel in an open, manifest way will suffice to keep the entire world enlightened, even if there is kibbutz galuyos, it means that all Jews are in Israel. But until
the good internet's set up everywhere.
That's right. Until it's all set up and ready, we need some local stations. That's the idea.
Wow. Yeah. And the Rebbe never told people to go to
the last what we heard from him was, was not that he didn't say everybody go to Israel. What he did say was during the Gulf War, for instance, no one should be afraid and everybody should go and that Israel is the safest place and so on and so forth.
This is very important. I don't know I told you 90 minutes when you asked me. I don't know if you can stay longer. If you can't, I'm going to stop.
I didn't even start at all what I was going to talk to you about.
I know, that's why, but this is so important. What's coming up is real for people. No, I'll stay on longer with you if you can stay on longer. I don't know if you can. But I'll just ask this question once more because it's a big deal for people, and what you're saying is a big deal. This is a piece of truth. So somebody just said, the Rebbe said that borders of Israel literally expand. So there are a lot of people, especially Lubavitcher people, who are taking this to mean the actual physical Israel off the radar, really, and not off the radar, but it's the same everywhere. It's going to be the same everywhere, and that we won't actually have to be on the land. And you're not saying that.
True. That's absolutely not true, because halachically, The land, the holiness of the land of Israel is today's days the land of the 7 nations, or was once the land of the 7 nations. When Mashiach will come, it's going to expand to be the land of 10 nations. But the 10 nations land is also a certain area in the Middle East. I don't know exactly where you carve out those borders that are going to include the extra 3 lands of Ammon, Moab, and Edom. When we speak about Israel expanding, means that the consciousness, the higher levels of divine consciousness, which used to be only available in Israel, is going to be possible to achieve wherever we are. As we said, there's going to be prophecy that could maybe inspire people, even though they're not technically within the borders of the land of Israel, which wasn't the case in the past. That prophecy was only in Israel and was not outside of the borders of Israel. Then, so things like that, and divine inspiration, and so on and so forth. So on the more spiritual kind of things, but in practical halachic observance, Shemitah, for example, letting the land this and not, it only applies to the land of Israel. It does not apply outside of the land of Israel. Certain certain carbon, let's say in the temple that you would bring on Pesach, you have to bring and we will do this when the temples return. We will bring barley, offering of barley the day after Pesach. That must come from the land of Israel. You can't say, well, I'm bringing it from Idaho because Israel will expand. No, it doesn't work that way.
And many of the mitzvahs depend on Kol Yoshvei Aleh, right?
But that's in Israel itself, not outside of Israel. So definitely,
sorry, guys, gotta leave Baltimore eventually.
Kibbutz Galuyos does include the actual picking up and moving to Israel. Does that mean that people will not have any residence anywhere else? I don't think so. I think people will for sure travel, and why not? And play. I don't know how much we would want to, but when you have such stuff going on here, but it definitely, Shivas Tzion is a literal thing of Jews returning to the land of Israel. So even when the Rebbe spoke about the, like 770 being the headquarters and the place where the Beis Hamikdash reveals itself and so on and so forth, the Rebbe would say immediately after that, and after that, it will move and we will go together, all of us together. This week in the Sikha, the Rebbe uses the term, I just love that term. We will all go, in Yiddish he says, Tanzit gehet. We will all go dancing. In other words, it will be all a dance up to Jerusalem. But it will be an aliyah. Everybody will make aliyah, yes.
All right, thank you so much. So much important, fresh, missing pieces coming down already. So now I'll try to, you guys, you can ask your questions, but we'll see if there's time for most of them at the end or some of them at the end, and Rabbi will prepare some unbelievable material. So take it away.
All right, so what I do want to speak about is when we say about prophecy and the return of prophecy, Maimonides says, Ein Safek, that there is no doubt, Shechazaras Hanavua, who Hagdamas HaMashiach. That's a quote from Maimonides. There is no, in Igeres HaTeman, his letter that he wrote for the Yemenite Jews, he said that even before Mashiach comes, prophecy returns to the Jewish people. So relating to what I said earlier, that at a certain point, the pendulum turned, and we started already entering it. In other words, there was the decline into total darkness, where in that darkness, we had to discover the spark within ourselves without outside inspiration. But once we begin that process, we start already drawing down the future revelations. So as Kabbalah and Hasidut started revealing itself in the world, along with that came also prophets. In other words, what we didn't see for thousands of years, we started seeing people who literally can see across the world and can predict future events, not with any kind of, doing some kind of whatever, just simply because God communicated with them. And they had direct access to Hashem like a prophet had. And we saw that if you read stories, you can look it up. You read about the holy Ari, Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Luria. You see his incredible abilities to know the hidden about everything in the world. And it became even more pronounced with the Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, called Baal Shem Tov because he was simply a healer. And at the same time, the third Chabad Rebbe that Tzemach Tzedek says about the holy Baal Shem Tov. and about his successor, Rabbi Dovber, the Maggid of Mezrich. These were two great rabbis who lived in the 18th century, that they literally can see across the entire world as like I can see what's happening in this room. They saw everything. They saw the entire world. Everything was open before them. They had this incredible vision where they could see the Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the first Chabad Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, is complaining in his book, how come Hasidim, how come people are coming to him asking for questions regarding material matters, and a lot of times a question regarding the future. You know, how should I deal with this situation? Should I buy? Should I sell? Should I pull out my investment over here because there's a threat of a war or this or that? And basically questions that you're asking for a profit. So the Rebbe was complaining, and he writes a letter about it. These are things that you ask prophets. And that's what he was saying. So therefore, don't bother me with this. He was basically trying to say, I'm not a prophet, so don't bother me. But the Rebbe, our Rebbe, said, since the Alter Rebbe in the end did not shut his office, and he continued, and not only did he continue, but his successors continued accepting all these people lining up with questions about how to deal with them, which are things that are only revealed to prophets. It's a sign that the Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the first Chabad Rebbe, and his successors were and are absolute prophets. And the Rebbe went on to speak in the summer of 1991 that we have already reached a point where prophecy has returned. And the Rebbe spoke about his father-in-law, and he said, my father-in-law was without a question a prophet. And he, in a very, I would say, cute way, if you can say, but because when a prophet is told to say something, he has to say it whether he's uncomfortable with it or not. The Rebbe kind of, in his own unique way, said very clearly that I am sitting over here and I speak to you as a prophet. Not only did the Rebbe say this, and I think this is so crucial for us to understand, the Rebbe said we should publicize this across the world, that God has chosen a human being and Hashem has imbued him with prophecy. And a prophecy on the highest levels of prophecy. The Rebbe discusses it there. Incredible levels of prophecy. And that he should be the advisor and the instructor of human beings across the world. He said not only to Jews, to human beings across the world in all matters that they can turn for guidance. And that it's our responsibility as Chabad followers to bring this knowledge to the rest of the world, and people should know that. So what I would like to do is just share briefly a few mind-blowing stories where you can see clearly that you're dealing with a human being who actually knew the future when everything was always pointing the opposite. And it's time and again and again and again and again. The first time the Rebbe spoke about something that only a prophet can know. When I say first time, I mean more public. A lot of private stories into individuals are like nonstop. But when we're talking about private, public, was the year before the Rebbe became Rebbe, after his father-in-law passed away. This is in 1950. That was the beginning of the Korean War. Now, within the Korean War, what happened was that North Korea attacked South Korea. Now, North Korean was communist, and South Korean was influenced by the United States of America, which was not communist. And when the North Koreans came into South Korea, and then it started to become a threat that this might become the next world war, because if America was going to defend South Korea against and Russia and China might join along on the other side, there you go, the whole world will blow up again. And you can imagine 5 years after 1945 and after the first two world wars, how incredibly frightening this was. Now, there were lots of Hasidim at that time who were living in Europe. Now, obviously, people felt that being in the United States, on the mainland, in the United States, will be safer than being in Europe, close to Russia. And these Hasidim that were in France had no one to turn to because the previous Rebbe had passed away. And this was in the interim period before the Rebbe became Rebbe. So the Rebbe became Rebbe a year after his father-in-law passed away. And they literally didn't know what to do. And but they knew that the son-in-law is an up-and-coming whatever. And they were trying to get the Rebbe to accept. They knew he's a godly man. They knew he's a man head and shoulders above everybody else. But the Rebbe was very, very strongly rejecting people's request that he should become the next leader. He said, I don't have it, which obviously he did have it, but he was saying he doesn't have it. And he said, I don't have what it takes. But in any case, when it came down and people needed to know business, because the people in France wanted to come to America at that time, Hasidim were there, they were terrified. The Rebbe's instructions was that they should stay put. And the Rebbe said these words a few times. The Rebbe said, people asked if they would turn into a war. And the Rebbe said these words. Hold on, give me a second. Regarding your question, regarding moving, I don't see a foundation. I don't see any basis to this scare. Stay where you are. Then the Rebbe said to another person, Reb Shnei Zalman Levitin asked the question. Again, same time. This is in the summer. This is on the, I can't tell you the dates. It was on the 6th day of the month of in 1950. Again, this is a few months before the Rebbe's Rebbe. The Rebbe says, "Habahala, the confusion, the whole panic to leave. I don't see any foundation for this." He's saying, "I don't see." Everybody's predicting a massive war that's going to throw the entire world into a world war. The Rebbe says, "I don't see." Okay, and the Rebbe said, like my father-in-law wrote already to people in letters that as of now, that's what I was also telling you regarding Israel. As of now, until we have a more specific, direct instruction, as of now, stay in your place and continue doing your holy work with your students. Then the last time, already in the month of Elul, same question comes up again. Things were boiling, coming to a boiling point. The Rebbe said, I love the way the Rebbe speaks. He speaks like a prophet. He says, I've already said 2 months ago. In other words, I've already stated. Like, what are you asking again? Like, just because you're reading, just because newspapers are panicking, how does that change when someone has a higher communication? How does that change? I've already said two months ago that according to the way I see it, he says, there won't be a war. There won't be a war, meaning there won't be a world war. And therefore, don't panic, and everybody should continue doing their work. So this is in 1950. Now we got to take it to the next most spectacular, crazy story, and this is 1967. Israel is being surrounded by, this is talking about in the months of May and June of 1967. The world, Israel is being threatened by how many countries attacked during the 6-day war? I'm not exactly sure. But they didn't attack Israel. Right. They preempted the attack, but they were gathering there a lot, many of them. And at that time, Jews across the world were terrified for Israel. People thought it would be another Holocaust. Literally, would be another Holocaust. That was the thing. And what people were doing is that all students that were learning in yeshiva during that time in Israel were calling their American students or people from Europe and England and other places that were learning in Israel were calling their children to come back because, God forbid, war breaks out and Israel is overrun by the millions of Arabs that are going to come rolling in. And we saw what happened in Hebron during the Hebron massacres, and during that they would not it wouldn't be a pretty sight what would happen, God forbid. The Rebbe instructed, the Rebbe instructed the boys learning in yeshiva that no one should leave. No one should leave. Again, I realize someone is taking responsibility. Not only that, what's amazing, and first of all, these instructions that the Rebbe then said was printed in newspapers all across Israel before the war. You can get the copies of those newspapers where it says, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, stay put, stay calm, everything will be good. 2 weeks before the war, there was a Lag BaOmer parade. The Rebbe would come out always for a parade with the children on an auspicious day of the year called Lag BaOmer, the third day of the Omer. The Rebbe stands, you can watch the video. The Rebbe is speaking in Yiddish, but he's literally standing there speaking like a prophet. He's saying these words. He says, this is something connected to our situation today regarding the Jews who are living in the land of Israel, He doesn't even speak about the threat. When everybody is terrified, he's not even talking about it's a dangerous time and everybody should, whatever. It doesn't say that. He says the Jewish people in the land of Israel are now standing in this kind of a situation. How are they standing? What's their station? In a state that God is protecting them and is sending them his blessings and his salvation on the greatest way possible, that they should come out of this, he doesn't even say bad time, just of this situation with great success. Now, if anybody knows what happened after the 6-day war, the success of Israel was like, boom, it was like unbelievable. Israel, the stocks of Israel rose like 1,000,000 times. In the whole world, everybody can see that this was like incredible.
And interestingly, that was the one time that the world had the utmost respect for Israel. Like, it comes with the might, comes with the God.
I have to tell you, the Rebbe, what does the Rebbe say? When he does say, he doesn't panic everybody, be scared, and, he says, but everybody should help out. He tells the children by the rally, what you could do and what you should do is to learn extra Torah and do extra mitzvahs, because all of that is going to add to the incredible divine salvation that is going to happen. Again, when everybody is, in Israel, they were preparing thousands and thousands of body bags for the soldiers. That was the mood. And that's the way people were feeling during that time. It was like the most frightening time. So I got to tell you a story. There was at that time, the ambassador to the UN, the United States ambassador to the UN, his name was Arthur Goldberg. Okay, so he was a Jewish fellow. He was the United States ambassador to the UN, similar to what Nikki Haley was, just a while ago, and I don't know who the ambassador today is to the UN. In any case, so he had an aide, an important aide, someone who worked for him, a nice Jewish boy who went into politics, and he himself related the story. I don't know his name. I just know his first name is Joe. I don't know his last name. So what happened is like this. He was in the office. He gets a call one day. A cousin of his asks him to please come to their house. He comes to visit his cousins. It's a couple. They have a one and only child. They say, we're calling you because we have a problem. Our son went to Israel, and in some weird way, he became a Baal Tshuva. He was a nice secular boy, but he somehow connected with Chabad Lubavitch. He went to learn in the Chabad Yeshiva, and he's now in school. Now, we sent him, we're worried sick for our son, and we sent him a plane ticket because we want him back now. We realized that the drums of war were beating so loud already, and they were terrified. And our son, crazy. He tells us that the Lubavitcher Rebbe said no one should leave. And the Rebbe said, that basically Israel is a safe place and no one should leave. And we don't know what to do. So we turned to the Rebbe. This is what they write. We turned to the Rebbe in a panic. We called the Rebbe, said, we want to come see the Rebbe. He told us that it would take 6 months to get an appointment. So they said, but what can we do? We need an answer. We need to know now. We need to speak to the Rebbe urgent, our son. And he's the one who's not letting our son come back. It's like, and they don't have no idea who the Rebbe is. They're calling up somebody. They're saying, we want a meeting now. He's like this principal who's sitting in the office and tells his kid not to come home. He's our one and only son. So the Rebbe, the secretary said, you can write in and then we'll get an answer. You can ask the question. So he wrote down. He says, they take this fellow who's the aide and Arthur, they show him, we got this answer. And what is it? It's a pasuk. It's a verse that says, Hine lo yanam v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael. Neither does he sleep and neither does he slumber, the guardian of Israel. That's the Rebbe's answer.
That was printed on the front page of many Israeli newspapers, that quote.
Yeah, that the Rebbe said. But in our case, the Rebbe said this to them, and they said, they turned to him and they said, but Joe, you are inside, you have inside information, you're connected to the State Department, you're connected. Tell us, is Israel really in a threat at this point? So he tells them, he said, I didn't want to scare them, but I basically had to tell them the truth. I told them that based on our information, he says, there's never been such a danger. It's so dangerous what's going on. He said that Arthur Goldberg, my boss, is literally not sleeping nights because he's terrified about what's going to happen. So he said, but what should we do, the rabbi? So he says, don't worry. Because I have connections, I'm sure if I ask for an appointment with the Rebbe, I'll get an appointment. That's what he did. He called Rebbe Chadikov the next day, and he said he works for Arthur Goldberg in this, and it's an urgent matter. And he can see the Rebbe. So now suddenly it becomes a major public issue. It's the United States. It's the ambassador to the United States. They want to meet the Rebbe. So he was told that the next day, 2:00 in the morning, he can come and have a private audience with the Rebbe. He said, it's an emergency. He expected to get an appointment in an hour. He said, He said, yeah, because it's an emergency. That's why tomorrow, 2 a.m., you can come. Anyways, when he came into the Rebbe, this guy was in the Rebbe's office already when he was 13 years old by his bar mitzvah. It's a whole other story with baseball, an incredible story. But at this point, he comes to the Rebbe, gives him a warm handshake, and the Rebbe tells him to sit down. But he apologized to the Rebbe. He says, I really have to apologize that I used my position, but I'm coming for a private matter. So the Rebbe made him feel very at ease, and the Rebbe said, what? And he said, I have a cousin, they have a one and only child, they want to bring their son back. And the Rebbe said that they shouldn't bring their son back because this but they're worried sick for their son. This is what they say to the Rebbe. So the Rebbe said to them, they have nothing to be afraid. Tell them because, the Rebbe answered like this. I myself have thousands of one and only children in Israel. And if I tell you nothing is going to happen in the land of Israel, to the Jewish people, there's no harm coming to the land of Israel, it's because I know so with absolute certainty. So he says to the Rebbe, this is what he says to the Rebbe. He says to the Rebbe, with all due respect, he basically kind of exactly the words he said, but the Rebbe might not have the inside information that I have. I have information I know from the State Department and this and that. And Israel is in grave danger. Now, by the way, he said in general, when he started asking this question, the Rebbe's demeanor changed completely. First, the Rebbe was smiling and the Rebbe's face became very serious. So then when he mentioned the Rebbe and he said these words, he said, Rebbe, Israel is in grave danger. The Rebbe stops him. And the Rebbe says, Israel is not in great danger now. She is ready for an enormous victory. These words. She is poised for enormous victory. And what you can do and what you can tell the father of this couple is that you can start putting tefillin every day and so on and so forth, and this will help. And then the Rebbe wished him, he was so taken aback by the way the Rebbe spoke with such confidence. He said to the Rebbe, the Jewish people are lucky that they have a leader like you. But the Rebbe said to him, please, one thing I ask from you is after the war is over, come back to speak to me. Anyways, he said he was sitting with Arthur Goldberg in their office, watching after 6 days later, watching the liberation of the Western Wall of the Kotel HaMaravi, watching the soldiers weeping at the wall, watching Rabbi Shlomo Goren take the shofar and blowing the shofar at that incredible moment. And Arthur Goldberg was going crazy. He said, who could have ever imagined? And at that moment, he couldn't resist. And he said, there was one man in New York, he says, he told him, I was by him, who told me exactly what was going to happen. But I'm going to just conclude the story. He went back to the Rebbe as the Rebbe had asked him to do. He was expecting the Rebbe to sit there and the Rebbe say, see, I told you so, right? None of that. When he came in for the Rebbe was very serious. And the Rebbe said to him, I have something very important to talk to you about. The Rebbe said that basically there's an enormous danger of what might happen now. This is after. See, when everybody thinks everybody's popping champagne, the Lubavitcher Rebbe is worried about enormous danger what might happen right now. What is the danger? The Rebbe says two things. The Rebbe says, he made an introduction like this. It's just a bone-chilling introduction. The Rebbe says that there were times in our history when there was open, godly miracles to the Jewish people, like at the time of the Exodus, at the time of Sinai time. And there are times of concealment. Whether it is the times of concealment, whether there's a time of revelation, the Jewish people have always been fortunate for unique divine providence. And our existence is always miraculous. But there's only a few times in history that it's being done in a very, very open way. Like we went out of Egypt, and what happened last week, the Rebbe said.
Those words when we went out of Egypt?
Last week, God revealed himself to the world. This is what the Rebbe said. And for thousands of years, the Rebbe says, for all this time, we used to live in Israel, then Hashem took it away, and whatever, they exiled us from the land, and so on and so forth. Last week, the Rebbe says, the Hashem, God Almighty himself, gave it back to us. Those were the words. Hashem gave the land back to us in a way that all the nations in the world can see that God Almighty himself has performed that miracle. The danger, the Rebbe said, is two things. Number one is that, well, God forbid, some people will start taking and and credit for that success. Military people will start thinking that it was the genius of the Israeli military and so on and so forth, as if it was their great thing. By the way, someone told me, I'm just going to share with you an interesting thing, that he was he heard it from someone who was there, was one of the training in the United States Army in West Point. West Point is an army base in New York. And on one day, part of their training is that they study various different strategic military, wars and campaigns and so on and so forth. So they were showing all these spectacular victories of armies that were expected to lose, but then they won. They were going to. So one of the students says, why aren't you talking about the 6-Day War? Why don't you speak about it? That's like obvious. So the guy said, the reason we don't use that as a prototype, because over there, everybody knows that it has nothing to do with the strategic of the Israeli army and so on and so forth. This Gentile fellow was saying, this military general or whatever he was, he says it was clearly the hand of God. And we all admit that victory was the hand of God. It was Hashem doing it. So the Rebbe says, danger number one is that people will start taking credit for themselves. Danger number two is that they will want to appease the Gentile nations, as the Rebbe says, and they want to appease the world. And Israelis will come running and want to give land that they think they conquered, but they didn't conquer it. God gave it to them as a gift. And they should not, God forbid, they have no right to take a gift that God has given to them and give it away. So
and yet that's what they've been doing the whole time.
And the Rebbe says, that's why I am talking to you. So he said, well, how can I help? The Rebbe says, that's why I am talking to you, because I know you're going to be meeting with many Israeli high officials that are going to be coming to America, and I want you to tell them what you heard from me or what you heard in this room. That's what. And the Rebbe says, and the Rebbe avoided, the Rebbe says, and I know that you shouldn't be afraid that this is dual loyalty. In other words, you're an American, you work in an American office, right. And here the Rebbe says, because America itself doesn't have any interest that Israel should give back the land, should give land. That's number one. In truth, America there's no American interest that Israel should not hold on to that land. Yeah. And secondly, the Rebbe said, and if they will ask you, these are the words, if they will ask you, by what right do you think you're an aide to Arthur Goldwyn, what gives you the right to tell Israel how they should behave? Tell them that a parent who had a one and only child wanted to bring their son home. And from this room, they were told, this is what the Rebbe told him, from this room, they were told that they have nothing to fear. And other thousands of people from this room. And on what basis? The basis is on God's providence for the Jewish people, and so on and so forth. And therefore, basically the Rebbe is saying, in the sweetest way possible, I'm talking to you prophecy. I'm telling you what I was told to you by God. And therefore, don't be foolish. Because the Rebbe said these words, even after the biggest miracle, God does not take away free will. That's amazing how much respect God has for us. He does this enormous miracles. He does it all, and he still gives us free will to mess it up.
The Rebbe's heart must have been broken a million times over.
So broken. And then a few years later, the total opposite happened. When everybody in Israel thought that everything is nice and dandy, and everything is safe, and Israel is soaring. This is, again, coming off the 6-Day War in 1973. In the summer, when everybody thinks everything is running, the Rebbe in the summer suddenly, out of nowhere, without prior warning, in the middle of the summer, starts encouraging that we should do whatever we can to amass children everywhere. The Rebbe amasses an army of children. And the Rebbe battles, literally, he even said it, he's battling Satan. He's battling spiritual forces of accusing angels that are up in heaven trying to bring about, God forbid, a catastrophe for the Jewish people. So what does the Rebbe? No one knows of anything. The Rebbe encourages that we should start, first of all, make summer camps during the vacation time and try to get as many Jewish children into the camps where they should study Torah and do tzedakah. And the Rebbe was saying these words, in order to lahashbiz oivim esnakim, in order to thwart the enemy that is trying to take revenge. This is after the 6-Day War. So the Arab countries suffered such a shameful defeat Now they're thinking of vengeance, to come back even with a greater. As it gets closer to Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe calls that they should have a massive gathering of children at the Kotel HaMaravi. It's amazing how not only does the Rebbe call for prayer, but the Rebbe knows exactly that it has to be the children, and that only the children can do it. It's the only time.
No accusation against children.
There's no accusation against children. So the Rebbe uses the children. And the Rebbe calls for massive rallies. And he doesn't stop talking about it again and again. And he keeps on saying the same thing. It's in order to stop, he quoting a verse in Psalms, from the mouth of little babies and little children, nursing babies, Yesada ta'oiz, you have established strength to cancel the enemy and no one knew what he's talking about. Until right before Yom Kippur, 3 days before Yom Kippur, I'll give you more, the Rebbe's mother's yard site. The Rebbe's mother passed away on Vav Tishrei. So 3 days before Yom Kippur, the Rebbe's holding a massive gathering. He's teaching Torah. He makes a siyum on a certain Masechta, on a certain tractate. The siyum means he concludes it. It's a custom to do that on a yard site on the day of passing. And during that talk, he's explaining halachically how parts of Syria and Damascus can be part of the land of Israel. So he's working it all out according to Torah that Israel will expand and so on and so forth. And we spoke about earlier in the days of Mashiach. And it says all the way to Damascus. The next day, he gathers hundreds of children in 770, in his words, and he's giving them coins for tzedakah, that they should give tzedakah, that they should give charity.
The Rebbe's synagogue.
770 is the Rebbe's shul. 2 days later, when it's on Yom Kippur, the armies of Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, I don't know who else participated in this massive attack, surprise attack, catching the Jewish people off guard completely. Now, the Rebbe later explained that the miracles of the 6-day war were far greater than the miracles. The miracles of this Yom Kippur War was much greater in 1973 than even the miracles in 1967. And the Rebbe explained, why? Is because when the Egyptians and the Syrians broke the Israeli defense and came through, there was nobody stopping them from them to roll all the way down into Tel Aviv, into Haifa. There was no one stopping them to come right into Tiberias and literally massacre millions of Jews. And without any explanation, that you can't explain it in any way militarily, both the Syrian and the Egyptian armies both stopped in their tracks and for more than I don't know how many hours, and they just waited. And it was during that time that Israel was able to launch a massive counterattack. Literally, they stood and they waited like angels blocking them without any explanation. They had it all open. It's the one thing in war is when once you break through, you roll. They didn't. They stopped. And the Rebbe said, you know why? The Rebbe said, is because the little children stopped them. So the Rebbe here is telling us weeks before, warning people, children, a pending danger. It's like literally like a prophet, not a clear prophecy. I'm going to lead you with one.
It's more than a prophecy. It's more than a prophecy. It's actually reaching up into the mechanism of which reality is generated and changing it. That is way. Prophecy is the minor part.
Yes, it's not just telling what will happen, but literally conducting it.
Which, by the way, I heard from Rav Kook, some previous speakers quoted Rav Kook to say that that's the difference between Chachma and Nebuah, between wisdom and prophecy, that prophecy actually changes reality. Just another definition.
When a prophet says something, it's God's command. It's God's command that should happen. So now let me conclude with you. I don't know how much time, but I have two more that are like.
How much? What is your time frame? When do you like to be?
I can sit with you another 20 minutes.
Okay, so I want you. That would be awesome. I'm not. I have to say, with full honesty, unless I forget something, this is the call that is moving me the most of any call I've ever done of an interview, because what I don't even have to explain why. So the two questions that are being asked that are really important to cover, and the rest you do. So when the Rebbe, somebody says when the Rebbe was here, it was different. Now who is the leader physically? Don't answer that yet. And the other question that, so I know the answer to that one, but please answer it soon. The other question I also have, like from the core of my being, when the Rebbe warned Arthur Goldberg's secretary, he predicted the future, obviously, that he warned against, we know that the Rebbe warned how many people in public and in secret to go talk to this official, that official, was not able to stop this insanity of the Israeli government operating against the divine plan, brainwashing, but whatever it is, so much. No need to elaborate. That's caused, the Rebbe talked about this ad infinitum and cried about it literally in public, screamed about it. Do you have any thoughts on what is the solution? Like I can say our part is to receive this new consciousness, that I know how to work on. I can say our part is to spread the word of Geula, that I know how to work on, but I do not know how to work on the Israeli government. So if you have anything to say about that, and then about who is our Rebbe,
So you wonder why in the last couple of years they can't have a government? Is there anything more absurd than the fact that you have one of the most sophisticated, probably the most technologically advanced, brilliant minds, and a literally ridiculous government they can't put together? They had 6 elections, I think they had 4 already, or maybe 5, and they're going to the 6th now in the last 3 years, because every time they can't put together a coalition.
I think this is 5.
Other than the fact, the last one managed to hold out for less than a year, and it crumbled just 3 weeks ago. Is there any question because they have lost their legitimacy from above to govern? It's clear.
Yes.
Because when it comes time, when basically, I think it's much more than that. When we say in our prayer, we say, on the seat of Mashiach, a foreigner cannot sit. And a foreigner means once it comes time for Mashiach to take the reins, so if you're doing what Mashiach wants you to do, then you're acting as an agent. But if you're thinking you're going to do your own thing, then exit. But again, God doesn't take away free choice. So everything kind of works, kind of shrouded within nature, but it doesn't.
So massive damage is still being done. What is our free choice?
Yes, even for instance, in this little just now, the last couple of weeks, an attempt to again declare a 2-state solution, which is opposite of everything. I mentioned this, I think, last time in a call. 2-state solution really means that the Temple Mount is God forbid, going to the other side. It's truth. It means there's no divine presence in this world. It's so clear what we are watching now is the global war. And it's camouflaged. It's beautiful visits to Israel by the President of the United States, and going to the Holocaust and memorial and memorizing the Jewish people. See, to go ahead to the Holocaust and speak about how much you're touched by the murder of 6 million Jews, but that's what, God forbid, you're creating as a possibility for the future, that if you're opening up a situation for a state that wants the destruction of the Jewish people in the land of Israel side by side, we see how much damage is done when they're not a state with weapons of mass destruction or weapons of, and to create a state. I mean, it's ridiculous, and it's all sugar coated as something in the name of peace and the advancement of humanity. But it's the fight against the truth, and it's going to fail. Well, you ask me what we can do. What we can do is I believe, is one thing. The more we permeate our moments with Mashiach, none of us live in isolation. Every single one of us is part of the greater scheme of things.
Yeah.
So what happens is, the more we imbue Mashiach into our surrounding, into every moment and every aspect of our lives, it impacts a certain refinement and a clarification in the rest of the world. It becomes harder for people that are not tuning in to remain ignorant, to remain indifferent to it. In other words, it forces people to start waking up. We all affect each other. And as a result of that, those very decision makers that have been deciding till now to ignore this messianic process, they themselves will at a certain moment realize that and that's how we can change it. Like the Rebbe said to this fellow, the Rebbe said, what you can do is put on tefillin yourself and have your father put on, have this other fellow put on.
We must see this as a spiritual war, understand the players, understand the weapons, understand the enemy, and also that the enemy only can get its force from us. So when we stop believing in it and being afraid of it and instead just take over in our own individual ways, then that's it. That is truth. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, and then about the...
I want to go back to the story of, I want to share with you the fall of the,
Okay, but also I don't want you to forget, I know you don't want to forget the answer to the question about who's there for us physically now. We used to have the Rebbe.
There is one answer to that. Moshiach and the Geula has been suspended in the air so that we can do our work to absorb it. The Rebbe didn't go anywhere. The Rebbe didn't go anywhere. He didn't bring us to a certain point and then, goodbye, see you later at the time of the resurrection. No. The Rebbe is here like he was, like millions of people can testify. Millions of people, thousands of people across the world communicate with the Rebbe all the time through his letters with unbelievable accuracy. The miracles are happening constantly, day in and day out. There's no question. Of course, there is the physical idea that physically our physical eyes can't see, but that doesn't diminish even for 1 second his involvement and his assistance as terms of the biggest channel of divine assistance to the world continues to this very moment. Not only does it continue, it intensifies every second. It multiplies and it grows exponentially bigger than it was a moment before. So it's not like we have less Rebbe in the last 28 years. We have way more.
Yeah, it's the time you described. He's not bound to his physical body anymore. He's, yeah. Okay, now the story.
I do want to
Thank you so much for rolling with it. The questions from the audience are so passionate, so relevant, so important, so real. So yeah, I could not ask.
Okay, here let's go to one more amazing one. Maybe we'll do two. I think this is like really crazy. This is what happened in 1985. Okay, 1985. Gorbachev is elected, or I don't know how the process works exactly in Russia, is appointed to be the head of the previous Soviet Union, the leader of the, I don't know how they call it, secretary. They have this fancy name, different than, it's a different name that, I don't know if they call secretary, chief secretary of whatever. He's basically the leader of the Soviet Union. So this is in 1985, okay? At that time, there was a professor, his name is Professor, he was a Soviet refusnik, I think. And he came up to Russia, he came out of Russia in the maybe the 1970s or 1980s. His name is Professor Yermiyahu Bronover. Okay, he's a professor in quantum physics. He's pretty serious fellow, this guy. Or in any case,
magnetohydrodynamics.
Yeah, whatever it's called. You ever had him on?
No, never even thought of it.
It would be fascinating. It would be fascinating. Anyways, what happened with him was that he gets a notice from the Rebbe that he should call friends and people back in Russia and notify them that, again, in 1985, that things are going to get better very soon and everyone will get out. Okay, this is in 1985. Now he's a believer in the Rebbe, but the New York Times at the time when Gorbachev became president or whatever, the leader, wrote a whole article of what a hardliner he is and how difficult this is going to be now, and like how tougher it's going to be. It's going to be harder to deal with this with him. In any case, when he spoke to people in Russia and he notified people back there about what's going on, what the Rebbe said, Hasidim obviously believed, but one woman said to him, "What do you mean?" He says, "My husband was just arrested and taken away to the KGB." I guess she was a Hasidic woman, and they were under immense persecution. He said, "My husband was, last week or a couple." So he comes back to the Rebbe And he relates to the Rebbe what kind of response he got when he told them in 1985 that the Rebbe is saying that things are going to get better now. And so the Rebbe answered these words: I state unequivocally that the situation will improve and soon everyone will leave. I just translated it to English, but exactly those words. I state clearly that this is what's going to happen. In 1980, so this is 1985. Now Gorbachev did come onto the scene. The Russian economy was like, the Soviet economy then was like really in shambles. He came onto the scene with a desire to make certain modifications in order to improve the economy. So he was going to be a force of change in Russia. But his plan was not at all to change and to dismantle the Soviet Communist Party. That was not at all his plan. But his plan was to make certain changes. In 1987, the Rebbe instructs Professor Bronover that he should build a community. Literally, he should build a shikun, he called it. A shikun, a whole neighborhood called Shamir, that's the name of it, in order to help facilitate the Jews that are coming up from Russia, primarily the academics. Because there will be many academics, so he wants these academics to resettle, to come to Israel. When they come to Israel, they should be already in an environment where they can be inspired for Torah and mitzvot. The Rebbe is forward thinking. 1987, okay? So watch the crazy thing. When Bronover met Gorbachev in Israel, so later, Gorbachev came to Israel. When Bronover meets him, he told Gorbachev this. And Gorbachev said these words: I can't understand. I myself had no idea that I was going to choose the more liberal approach. I actually planned the opposite. So the Rebbe is telling in 1985, when Gorbachev was becoming something that Gorbachev is going to do that Gorbachev himself doesn't plan on at that time. And what happened in 1989, we know that the Soviet Union came crashing down. The government was dismantled, and the rest is history. We're talking about a government that controlled hundreds of millions of people. It's interesting that in the summer of 1991, there was a attempt to overthrow Gorbachev. This is already after Russia had already gone through this transformation. It was called the August, how do they call it? A coup. August coup. The August coup. Lines and lines of tanks came rolling into Moscow. And suddenly everybody, because you realize right after the collapse, so many people went to Russia, especially Chabad Hasidim, to help, in the Renaissance. So so when the Rebbe was, interesting, before Pesach that year, before Passover in 1991, the Rebbe wrote a letter. And the Rebbe said that this year was a year of miracles, but for sure, before the end of the year, there's going to be many, many more miracles that God is going to provide. Again, so he's writing a letter to the Jewish people talking about many miracles that are still going to happen. So in the summer, panic. All the people that are in Russia literally are panicking. The Jews that are there, that God forbid, everything is going to be reversed now. That's what it looked like. When they asked the Rebbe at that time, the Rebbe said, Kipashut, which means as simple, that all plans and programs should continue as usual, and all summer camps should continue. No change, everything should be exactly as it is. You're talking about a question of life and death for who knows how many people. and 60 hours, the whole revolt. And not only that, the revolt itself actually brought to a stronger resolve to transform everything. So there was like this danger. And that, by the way, that's the week the Rebbe spoke about this concept that prophecy will return and that we should notify the world that he's a prophet. It was exactly as that coup was taking place. And he was telling everybody, when the prophet says there's no reversal, that's what the Rebbe then spoke, that a prophecy is on target, no reversal. So when they tried to reverse it, he broke it. It's amazing, just literally broke it. Everybody knows, I'm going to conclude, in one of the worst hurricanes in in United States history, one of the worst hurricanes. There are 4 hurricanes that hit the United States as a category 4, as a category 5, made landfall as a category 5. Hurricane Andrew in 1992, in the summer of 1992, was one of those hurricanes that hit as a category 5 hurricane. Now, they were predicting on Florida that this would be the worst kind of the worst situation. They were predicting that you can have thousands of people literally dying in this hurricane because it's
Andrew,
coming.
You're talking about Andrew.
Hurricane Andrew in 1992, and at that time the shliach's name is, so it's Sunday morning. They announced, they gave an order came from the governor in Florida that everybody in Broward County and in Miami, everybody should evacuate because it's coming. We're talking about sustainable winds of 165 miles per hour. I looked up this hurricane. 63,000 homes were demolished in the Bahamas and then in Louisiana, different places are there. But in Florida, Hasidim Rabbi Tenenhaus, Ephraim Tenenhaus is his name, chief shliach in Broward County. Sunday morning, the day before the hurricane, he called Rabbi Korf, who was the head Chabad emissary, and he said, Rabbi Korf, please call the Rebbe and ask him if we should leave. Everybody should pack up. Literally, the highways were jammed. Everybody was leaving. Rabbi Korf said, no, I'm not going to call, you call. So he calls Rabbi Groner, and he asks Rabbi Groner and this is already after the Rebbe's stroke. Rabbi Groner says, okay, I'm going to ask the Rebbe. Rabbi Groner comes and asks the Rebbe. Someone who was inside the room when that question was asked, said Rabbi Groner asked the question 5 different ways because the Rebbe was limited in the way the Rebbe can answer. Should I tell them not to leave? Should I tell them yet to leave? Does the Rebbe want me to tell them? Like back and forth in every which possible way. The answer came out without any question, without a batter of an eye. Everybody should stay put and they shouldn't go anywhere. Now, you're having a hurricane coming that the United States government says, everybody leave because this is a threat. Literally, we don't know if thousands of people will die. And the Rabbi Tenenbaum asks, the Rebbe says, no one, everybody stay put. Stay in your places. An hour later, Rabbi Label Shapiro, he's from Miami. He sends in to ask the same question. He asks if that which was asked for Broward County, if the same thing applies for Broward, also applies to Miami. And the answer was same thing, don't move. And the third shliach in Sunny Isles, his name is Rafi something, also asked. 3 of them asked, and all of them were told, stay put, don't move. The next morning, Monday morning, the hurricane came blowing over. Everything, the newspapers couldn't believe it. That whole entire area was completely like, there were down trees and wires and stuff like that, but like the devastation that they were expecting and the death, nothing happened. In the New York Times, I have a picture of the article. In the New York Times, they wrote.
Now we know the book. Louis Hagiula. People were asking about the book.
This is what I'm using of it. It's a normal. It gives me. What's cool over here is it brings all the newspapers of all these events. You get to see the write-ups of how they're written before.
This is prophecies of redemption, but I assume it's all in Hebrew.
Yeah, this is the one. It says Rabbi's advice is simply divine. This is the New York Times. The next day or a day later, talking about the hurricane in Miami that completely, went against every single prediction that what would be.
I was in a press conference in New York around that time, and I talked to a few of the reporters, and I asked them what they thought of what the Rebbe was saying, and they're like, one of them said, I don't know, but I started lighting Shabbat candles. That was a woman. Another guy from the New York Times said, I think he might be holy. I think he might be the Messiah. And he started explaining to me why. Like, people in New York knew what was up with the Rebbe because it was too obvious.
Yeah. So the main thing is, so let's conclude. The Rebbe told us that it's a prophecy that Mashiach is coming in, the Geula is happening, and that we should prepare ourselves. Prophecies don't go back. So all the darkness, sometimes we get, as we spoke about so many times, about all the darkness that's going on, and we're finding this. We should, God forbid, not we shouldn't freeze. because you realize that this is all just little tiny leftover debris of an exile. That's still, because I'll put it this way, the storm winds of the redemption are blowing in, and little pieces of debris of exile are still being thrown around. And if you try to follow them, sometimes they hit you in the nose. So instead of focusing our energy on all this leftover debris, we should focus all of our energy on the enormity of the redemption that's in full force, it's happening. And may Hashem help that we should merit the completion of the Geula completely. Good book, Nevuas HaGeula. It's I spent quite a bit reading it today to get my information for this. It's really fascinating. Okay, everyone.
Rabbi, if you want to be, but I just, this was unbelievable. But of course, I'm just thinking now, like, what next? Because people are, I'm sure you weren't reading the chat, but people are like really, really responding to this. And then some people are asking, why don't people know this? And I didn't know this before. And oh my gosh, obviously the question is, how do we get this out in much bigger ways? That's a question I have for everybody, and everybody can help. Simply start by sharing the summit. Like I say, I'm saying ad nauseum, gateofunity.com/summit4. It's also streaming on YouTube for now. If that's easier. And I do want to do something different with this recording, because I feel like we've never had this discussion before, and I really feel like this is the most powerful discussion that we've had. I'm saying you and I, and it has to be had, because you're not talking about belief. This is the evidence. This is evidence, and that's one of the things that one of the functions that prophecy is here to, to fulfill, that we can see with our own eyes.
The Rebbe, interesting. Let me just conclude with something. The Rebbe once pointed to, before the Iraq War, which was another thing that the Rebbe prophesied, that Israel will be safe and everything will be good. And after the war, we found out that Saddam Hussein had actual poisonous chemical weapons aimed to Israel, fully locked and loaded. And without any explanation, the order did not come that they should send that. Israel was in panic. And the Rebbe did not say the entire year, Israel is the safest place. Everybody should continue going. It's safe. It's safer than anywhere else in the world. Go to Israel. Don't stop going. And in the end, 49 Scuds did fall. None of them were chemical weapons. And in every single place it fell. When it did damage, for some reason, there was no loss to human life. It was incredible. Not even injury.
People walked out. Not one person. Apartment buildings.
Crazy. It was like the most unbelievable revelation. So during that time, the Rebbe published a talk that he gave many years earlier, in which he discusses the idea that God once made a massive war between the Babylonians and Egypt. I don't know which war exactly he's referring to. And the purpose of that war was to prove that Ezekiel was a prophet. That for the Jewish people who didn't believe that there's prophecy, that the people should believe that Yecheskel Hanavi was a prophet, God brought about that war. So Hashem so clearly wants the world to know that there is a prophet in Israel. There's a prophet, and prophecy has returned, and we need to share this. It's simply unfair to the rest of the world. We need to share this, because the evidence is there. Literally, I just did a little bit of I plan on actually, now you inspired me, I plan on doing a class just on the prophecies.
100%. Let us know in advance. Let us know in advance so I can invite my people.
Good, and we're going to have literally, because I want to do it with a what do you call it? Prepare it with a so you have the exact dates, you have the exact events, and put it out there, because people should know this. The law there's laws regarding prophecy. When it comes to a prophet, if you know a person is a holy man and is a godly man, means you're not dealing with someone, God forbid, who's shady. Talking about someone who's devoted to the well-being of mankind, like we saw our Rebbe. Someone who's devoted day and night to giving and to caring and to doing selflessly, and he has predicted the future, and it came through. One is forbidden. It's one of the prohibitions in the Torah to question his prophecy, whether it's true or not. Once someone is established as a prophet, it is an obligation, a biblical obligation, for people to appreciate that, understand that, and then live by that prophecy. So to us, it's important to live by the prophecy of the redemption. We need to know that even though, okay, it's taking some time for whatever reason, but the words that the Rebbe then spoke, that we are at the threshold of the redemption, is 1,000% true, and is coming and is manifesting as we speak every day more and more.
Amen. And somebody's, okay, we should see it now. So somebody's providing the role of like this sincere, yearning, wounded doubter, and just asked of how come he's not here seen physically yet. I'm going to say again, if you haven't done your piece, every soul here is in the world right now, because that soul in the body, in that body, carries a piece of what has to be done. That might just be one little thing in your life, or it might be sharing the summit, or it might be learning something from Torah, taking on the mitzvahs, which we'll talk about later, the no chayd laws, talk about it in the next call. If you haven't done it, we're waiting for you. So we must, as painful as it's been, and I don't justify suffering. I got into this because I experienced loss, and I don't want this. I don't want it. I don't want it in the biggest possible way. But I have learned that asking why and why not, it's like beating your head against a brick wall. It wounds you. And the real answer is, what am I supposed to do about it? Because when we do what we're supposed to do, and I don't think it's that much more, Rabbi Wolf, or that, then it's just, you look at an electrical circuitry. There has to be the generator and the distributor and the transformer, and I don't know what I'm talking about, and the wiring that comes outside the house and wiring comes into the house. And if there's one little piece of wire not there, nothing works. The vast forces need your thing. So do your thing and don't be a victim. It's a war.
Mashiach now.
Amen. We'll talk.
Have the rest of a very happy Tisha B'Av, Ezrat Hashem, to all this year.
Yes, amen. Okay, Rabbi Wolf, you're free to go. Somebody's asking me to summarize what you said in a few sentences. He said that he said prophecy will return. This is itself as a prophecy. It will return for each of us in our own way. Prophecy involves making a difference. Prophecy is a connection from the inside. And that that he didn't say all of it, because he said in previous calls and explained that just like Moses was a central soul, that was eventually we won't need, we will all be, there will always be a central soul that connects us, because we're one organism. But in any case, there's a central soul in every generation, which he did not say in this call. And the Rebbe is that is here to collectively, that contains all of our souls, that we all have a spark of that central soul in us, and we need to activate that spark. We activate the central soul, and the central soul activates us. It's a reciprocal holographic relationship. So he's pointing out in this call literal examples, and there are thousands and thousands that are printed, and probably many thousands more that are just between the Rebbe and an individual who, I have a friend whose mother had she had an x-ray. She was told she had a tumor. She went to several doctors for second opinions, no second opinions, that's it. And my friend went to the Rebbe's secretary. This was the same time around Hurricane Andrew, after the Rebbe had a stroke and was only nodding or shaking his head when answered to questions. And she said, the secretary gave it over to the Rebbe, that I'm asking that my mother, when she goes to get the biopsy, they should find not inflammation, they should find absolutely nothing. And the Rebbe nodded. And that's exactly what happened. And there's story upon story upon story upon story upon story upon story upon story, endless, of this. And the Rebbe's bodies of work, the things that he spoke and revealed and transmitted, are waiting for us to take. This is what I teach in my school. All these people teach. Not everybody teaches the Rebbe. Rabbi Wolf obviously does. I do. But these are waiting for us to absorb, to activate us, so that we can play our role with divine power, with literal divine power. I don't throw these words around because they're cool. This is real. So that's basically, his thing is about his title is Return of Prophecy, and he's showing you not just some of the sources on prophecy from the Torah, but specifically some of the actual prophecies that the living central soul, that, I lived in the Rebbe's neighborhood, saw the Rebbe thousands of times with my own eyes, talked to the Rebbe, whatever. not at length, but went by the Rebbe and asked for blessings, and so did millions. So it's the heads of state, celebrities, Jews, non-Jews. The Rebbe is the teacher of everybody. Rebbe really, literally means teacher. It also stands for Rosh B'nai Israel, the head of the souls of Israel, the head of the collective body. So that's the central soul. I know I'm talking fast. I have to go. David needs to process the call. But I just want you to understand, Rabbi Wolf's primary thing was he was showing us, and he answered so many questions so brilliantly and powerfully and truthfully. And I'm spinning from this. It was really hard for me not to break down crying, not break down. I was, because he put on the table literal prophecies that the Rebbe made that came true, that were printed in papers, that were involved life and death for millions of people. And he's showing us that prophecy has returned, and that the more we connect with the Rebbe, specifically his teachings, the more we will inaugurate that prophecy from within ourselves, have the knowledge and the power to act, to multiply and amplify the difference that we can make. But nobody should be waiting. Right here and right now is where we go beyond our nature. And we see that we are players in the matter. And somebody complained that I said players, and I'm trivializing. The Rebbe used the word players in an audience that he had with somebody who loved baseball. And he asked him, are you a player? Or are you a spectator in the stands? So ask yourself the same question. It's about being players. There's plenty of people here and plenty of information. It could take you a lifetime to consume everything that everybody here knows, and they keep learning. So you just have to feed yourself with knowledge, and don't wait to take action. Start with sharing the summit. And then take something from the summit to make a change in the way that you eat, sleep, talk, what you learn. Learn something you weren't going to learn before. Access some of the healing information, because one of the things that keeps us from absorbing is things that need healing. So that's really, I'm summarizing. Maybe it was more than a few lines, but that's basically my summary. Okay, I'll see you in half an hour. Bye.